Bom dia a todos. Estamos iniciando agora mais uma live da Next for IT. Hoje nós vamos falar sobre gestão de vulnerabilidades. Tá? Por favor, vamos aguardar mais 2 minutinhos aqui. Estão entrando o restante dos convidados e já daremos início. Bom, vamos dar início agora, então, mais uma live de gestão de vulnerabilidades. Imagino que todos os convidados já tenham entrado aí. Algumas informações importantes antes de iniciarmos a live, tá? Será uma live que grande parte da apresentação será em inglês, tá? Então, foi disponibilizado aí na barra de tarefa de vocês uma função de closed caption. Se vocês notarem, tem uma função CC, tá? E quando você habilita ela, você dá um clique para habilitar ela, e você tem um botãozinho de configuração logo ao lado, onde você pode escolher entre as línguas de tradução para o português ou para o espanhol, tá? Então, fiquem à vontade de habilitar aí o closed caption para vocês, tá? Também importante para esse webinar, nós faremos um sorteio de um Google Home ao fim da apresentação, tá? Para aqueles que não se inscreveram ainda, para participar do sorteio, é muito importante que vocês se inscrevam nesse link, tá? O link que está aparecendo na tela, tá? Vocês podem escanear com o celular de vocês, efetuar a inscrição, tá? Estará aberto para inscrição até às 10h30, tá? Temos ainda 28 minutos previstos aí para vocês realizarem a inscrição, tá? E essa inscrição ela é importantíssima para que vocês participem do sorteio do Google Home, tá bom? E como uma iniciativa aqui com relação ao produto que nós vamos apresentar hoje, tá? A SECPOD, junto com a Next for IT, estará patrocinando um brinde para todos os pedidos que forem colocados esse mês, tá? No mês de outubro. É uma promoção exclusiva para o mês de outubro. Tá? Então, para aqueles que tiverem interesse, quiserem fazer um trial da ferramenta, nós também vamos disponibilizar um trial dessa ferramenta por um período de 10 dias, tá? Para que vocês possam entender como a ferramenta utiliza e, principalmente, tirar as dúvidas. É uma ferramenta de muito fácil trato, uso. A Next for IT, basicamente, já utiliza essa ferramenta há um bom tempo no mercado brasileiro. Temos exclusividade de distribuição da ferramenta no Brasil, e será um prazer poder apoiá-los aí, aqueles que não testaram ou não fizeram uso ainda da ferramenta. Tá? Bom, rapidamente, quem vai fazer essa apresentação será o Greg. O Greg é o vice-presidente de alianças da SECPOD, tá? E eu acho que vai ser uma apresentação muito bacana, principalmente em épocas de LGPD. Né? Nós estamos falando aí de uma lei que entrou em vigor agora no mês de agosto, né? E um dos requisitos é a questão da gestão de vulnerabilidade. Tá? Nós montamos alguns webinars, esse é o primeiro de uma série de webinars, tá? Onde nós faremos algumas apresentações de produtos que compõem a entrega ou os requisitos técnicos com relação à LGPD. Tá? Então, acompanhem, aproveitem aí essa apresentação, vai ser de grande valia. Rapidamente sobre a Next for IT. A Next for IT é uma consultoria com foco em cibersegurança. Tá? Nós temos alguns serviços, dentre eles a parte de gestão de segurança da informação, gestão de vulnerabilidade, suporte especializado de TI, programas de conscientização e segurança, entre outros, tá? Nosso foco é realmente a parte de cibersegurança. Nosso time é um time extremamente capacitado. Nós contamos aí com profissionais com diversas certificações diferentes, certificações globais, certificações de mercado, como Security Plus, SAP, CISA Plus, Pentest Plus, ISO 27001, entre outras. Tá? Então, eu acho que isso nos dá, nos gabarita em entregar um serviço diferenciado para os nossos clientes, que estão cada dia mais buscando por segurança, devido às normativas e também ao movimento de mercado que tem acontecido. Tá? Eu sempre gosto de mostrar esse slide aqui para os clientes que já participaram conosco, sabe que nós trabalhamos muito forte o desenvolvimento de uma estratégia de proteção de endpoint. Tá? Então, para alguns de vocês, não é nenhuma novidade montar uma estratégia de proteção de endpoint. Não vou entrar em detalhes aqui, mas basicamente eu coloquei aqui o símbolo, o ícone do CNRNow, tá? Como onde o CNRNow consegue nos apoiar, tá? Para essas necessidades. Então, nós temos hoje com o CNRNow uma cobertura para a parte de patch management, para a parte de security hardening, tá? Ou até mesmo a criação de benchmarks com as principais recomendações de mercado. Tá? O CNRNow também tem a parte de EDR, o módulo de Vulnerability Management, que eu acho que é o principal foco aqui, mas até um pouco antes, conversando aqui com o Greg, nós achamos prudente fazer uma apresentação, dar um overview geral da ferramenta, com uma POC de como funciona a análise de vulnerabilidade. Com certeza será algo bem bacana para aqueles que já atuam aí nos departamentos de cibersegurança. É uma ferramenta que ela vem para agregar muito valor aí no dia a dia de vocês para a tomada de decisão, ok? Bom, eu vou interromper o meu compartilhamento agora e vou chamar o Greg, tá? Para ele iniciar a apresentação dele. Tá? Bom, então vamos lá. Greg, good morning, how are you?
Doing quite well. Thank you, Lucas.
Sounds good. So Greg, I did a quite quick introduction to the attendees, and we are going to be starting the presentation in English. I pass you the ball now. Please share your content and let's get started.
Okay, I assume you can see the content.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Well, I'm with SECPOD Technologies, and our main product is SanerNow. SanerNow is all about endpoint security for Windows, Linux, Mac systems, and it combines a number of different tools into one platform to really provide cyber hygiene for your endpoints. And the whole concept is behind securing endpoints and also meeting regulatory standards such as LGPD and other standards around the world. I'm going to spend a few minutes going through a couple of slides about endpoint security and then show you the SanerNow product. As you know, enterprises struggle with trying to deal with endpoint security risk. There are a lot of attacks, and IT and security is complex. There's a lot of products, there's a lot of things involved in being secure. There's generally a lack of security knowledge and skills. It's a fast evolving area, and it's difficult to have properly qualified people to handle all the tasks that need to be accomplished. And products tend to be expensive and sometimes hard to use. Now, as many of you know, security-wise, there are many new vulnerabilities every day, 40 to 60 new vulnerabilities discovered. 90% of attacks exploit vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. So as organizations look at trying to be secure, the endpoints are a major area of weakness. It's also an area that can be addressed with proper cyber hygiene practices. Currently, a lot of companies take many months to discover vulnerabilities and many more months to mitigate the risk. And over a couple thousand new attacks are being launched every day. Typically, audit exercises are only performed monthly or quarterly or biannually. And most security products are complex and costly. So that's the problem. That's what everybody's dealing with when it comes to endpoint security and trying to reduce the risk in their organizations. Now, this particular slide I think is interesting in talking about what Saner now provides. On the left side, you see 3 blue bubbles, and those are really kind of the business cases that we are looking at. One is endpoint security, having proper cyber hygiene practices in place to secure those endpoints. And those endpoints can be Windows desktop servers, Linux systems, Mac systems, all the computing endpoints. And then the next bubble is risk and compliance. And that can be anything from GDPR to HIPAA, PCI, CSF framework, or LGPD. And as everybody knows, those regulations are becoming more and more strict and required, and companies need to really focus on protecting data and putting proper practices in place. So that's the second business case that we look at with Saner now. And the third is just overall IT operations. How do you manage those endpoints? How do you install software across the enterprise? How do you delete software? How do you know what software is being used? Having visibility into your overall endpoint environment all the way across, no matter what the platform is. So those are 3 business cases that we address with Saner now. On the right side, you see some green bubbles. And those green bubbles are the tools that are included with the Saner Now product. First one is vulnerability management. And what does that mean? It means scanning for vulnerabilities on those endpoints. Most endpoints have a lot of vulnerabilities. Typically, when we go in and do a scan, there's generally 100 to 200 vulnerabilities, maybe 100 plus are critical. So it's important to know the vulnerabilities. Well, with the Saner Now product, we push an agent out. That agent does a scan every day. So every day you know what the security posture looks like for those particular endpoints. And all the regulatory standards require that you have vulnerability management in place. But when people think about vulnerability management, it's not just scanning for vulnerabilities, it's also mitigating those risks, doing something about it. So you know you've got thousands of vulnerabilities. We've had clients, enterprises that say have 1,000 endpoints, and they have 1.3 million vulnerabilities, and many of those are critical. So this tool helps you address that and deal with it. Now, from a vulnerability management perspective, again, it's not just scanning, but it's risk mitigation through patching and fixing misconfigurations. So it's very advantageous to have a set of tools that combine scanning and patching. If you think about it, it's from a process standpoint, it really makes sense. You know what the vulnerabilities are every day, and then you know what patches need to be applied, and the tool allows you to schedule and apply those patches. So that's a very effective process to dramatically reduce the risk that an enterprise has for exploits, whether it be ransomware, other exploits. And it makes sense. Sometimes companies have maybe a security group that's doing scanning with various tools, but then there's a totally independent group that's doing the patching. In our case, we blend that together, which makes the resources and the whole process much more effective. Asset management. You know, what assets do you have? What software is installed all the way across the enterprise? And are there out-of-date applications that need to be removed? Or are there applications that you're paying for that don't need to be used or paid for? Well, you can find all that information out. Compliance management, as I kind of mentioned, there's on every operating system, Windows, Linux, Mac, we have 400 or 500 different configuration checks that are performed every day. So you know exactly what the security posture looks like, not just from vulnerabilities, but also from configuration compliance. In general, endpoint management, knowing what's going on with those endpoints, being able to make changes. Other checks, is AV installed on all the endpoints, antivirus? What are the applications that automatically start in the Microsoft startup folder that should not, what ports are open, all that kind of information is visible. Threat detection, there's a threat feed that looks for indicators of attack and indicators of compromise so that you can take actions. So those are all different tools that the product has to address those three business cases in the blue bubbles: endpoint security, risk and compliance, and IT operations. The idea is to really automate much of the cyber hygiene, from assessment to mitigation, detection to response, knowing what your problems are, knowing whether you're conforming to regulatory standards and what changes need to be made, and monitoring activities. The Saner Now platform is it's a platform of tools. As I mentioned, there is an agent that is installed on each of the endpoints. It gathers the information and understands what vulnerabilities are there and what misconfigurations and so forth. It reports back to a server, and you have this information available to you in a management dashboard that I'll show you in just a minute. It's a very easy to use dashboard, so it lets you see pretty much instantly what's going on. So the idea is, as soon as you deploy an agent, the agent starts a scan on an endpoint, which takes 5 to 10 minutes. Once that is completed, you will see the results. So you can deploy agents very easily with a number of different tools across your entire enterprise. You'll then see within a matter of minutes what your security posture looks like, what vulnerabilities are there, what misconfigurations are there, and then you can take actions to rectify that. And you can do it in two ways. You can do it with jobs, and you can also do it automatically. I'll show you the console here in a minute. We have quite a number of customers across the world. We also provide technology to other security companies like Amazon and Alien Vault and Tanium and quite a number. So our business is made up of providing the Saner Now product, which we're talking about today, and then we also OEM technology. So I think at this point, I would like to go in and show you what the product looks like. Just a second. Okay, I assume you can see the platform right now. Let me get this window out of the way here. Okay, I may need to log in again. No, it's still good. So as I mentioned earlier, you deploy an agent. Once the agent's deployed, it automatically does a scan, and then you see the results here on the dashboard. I like this particular dashboard. There's 6 different dashboards. The one you're looking at now kind of summarizes how many vulnerabilities are there. In this case, there's only half a dozen or so endpoints, and so there's only 21 critical vulnerabilities out of 103 total, which if you have a normal installation, it would be more in the thousands or multiple tens of thousands or more. You can see all the CVEs and drill into that information. The handy thing here is that once an agent's installed, you automatically get all this information, and it's updated on a daily basis. So you don't really need to invest any other time with it or resource. Once you know you have all these vulnerabilities, you can go into the patch management tool. And from here, you can see what's going on. You can go ahead and look at missing patches. And I must say, normally on my demo database, there's quite a long list here of patches, but somebody has been doing some hybrid hygiene activity and fixed a lot of these things and patched a lot of things. So there's not too many here. But if I want to select one, I can go in and create a job and have it automatically patch that system. You have other controls here for rebooting and remediation end time and scripts, pre and post scripts, and test and deploy. All these other actions or criteria that you have are pretty important in the patching process, such that you can control it and manage the process conveniently. But there's 2 ways of looking at it. you can go ahead and create jobs for a group of devices. Say I want to patch, these devices across these applications across 50 devices, for example. You have different groups of devices. You can go ahead and create a job to do that, and it'll automatically take care of it. The other way to do patching is to automate it. So you may say, well, for products like browsers, Firefox, or maybe the Adobe products reader and things like that, you can go ahead and create a rule that says, well, every time a scan is done, which is daily, and it discovers that, well, there's critical updates required for Firefox or Adobe Reader or something else, go ahead and apply that patch. Now, some of the users may be patching the products and some may not, but you need them all to be patched and to eliminate those critical vulnerabilities. So the general idea is to make the whole patching process as simple as possible by automating portions of it, and then other things having more control through jobs, such as when you're patching servers or maybe other systems. So you can do it both ways. You can also deal with missing configurations or misconfigurations for Windows or different systems. This is CentOS or Microsoft Windows. And you can fix those misconfigurations by working with GPO policy or if our product. You can set up benchmarks that I'll show you that would detect the misconfigurations. You can also look at firmware stuff, and sometimes Microsoft now is required for patching some firmware updates. You can also roll back patches. It's been known that occasionally Microsoft releases patches that don't work in various environments, and you may want to roll them back. And then you can also get the status of jobs. The whole concept that what I'm showing you right now is simply that it's very easy to go through the patching. The patching is tied to the vulnerability scanning, which makes it a very convenient process overall. There's other tools like asset management. And this lets you know all the assets you have across the entire enterprise, and also things like license information and what applications are outdated or rarely used. This is convenient because maybe you're paying for applications that you don't need to be paying for. You would be able to figure that out. You can blacklist and whitelist applications. So it's all about asset management and controlling that. And then there's configuration management, or compliance management. And here, every day when the scans are done, it also looks at all the rules that are there for a particular benchmark and looks for any deviations from that. For example, if I go in to look at creating a new benchmark, the benchmark, we have benchmarks set up for for standards like HIPAA and PCI and NIST 800-171. Then we have general benchmarks. The general benchmarks are useful to work on to create your own benchmarks. For example, here's the list of the operating systems that are covered. And if I go into Windows 2016, for example, general benchmark, I can see that I have lots of categories of information, and there's rules within each one. These can be enabled or disabled, and there's values that can be associated with them. For example, if I go down to something like password attributes, I can see, well, the minimum password length is 12. It could be changed to something else. So these are all tailorable, but it really lets you look at how to conform, how to make sure that not only are you knowing what vulnerabilities exist on a daily basis, through patching you can mitigate those risks, but then also properly hardening those systems based upon these 400 or 500 different configuration settings, and making sure that all the endpoints you have are properly managed and properly secured. Once you look at this, you can save the benchmark and you can apply it to groups of devices. So you may have different benchmarks that you want for different groups. So that's the compliance tool. There's also an endpoint tool. The endpoint tool has lots of information that's automatically gathered. There are many checks, and the checks are things like, well, what are all the open ports across all the endpoints in the organization? What's the BitLocker status, for example, or BIOS information? Endpoint protection software, antivirus. Is it installed on all the devices and is it up and running? So those are all typical types of checks that you might have. And then there's lots of actions that you can take. For example, to disable devices or get rid of temp files, or change the registry, remove entries if malware's left something around in the registry. Also, IT things like software deployment. So we have quite a number of products that can be grouped together and installed automatically across many devices. And if you want to install things that are not in that group, you can just drag and drop the installer packages into here, bundle it, and push it out across your organization. So that's just a very convenient, one of many IT capabilities that are there. You can also uninstall applications, and so that's that particular tool. So the endpoint tool, I think, is something that, it's kind of that third business case. So one being reducing risk through vulnerability scanning and patching, vulnerability management. The second being regulatory compliance with LGPD or other requirements. And the third is general IT management. So these are all kind of combined together, where the agent's gathering the information to support all those tools. The other tool we have is called EDR, for threat detection. And this one's kind of interesting. We have a threat feed that looks for indicators of compromise and attack. And you can also build your own queries. Some people really like this. It's a little bit more sophisticated. There's many probes that you can use. You can simply drag and drop these probes and put them over here and create queries and apply these queries in real time to a group of devices. And then you can take actions. You can create a response also to modify endpoints group at a time. So it's pretty powerful in many ways. Most people don't need to really get involved with that because there's so many capabilities within the endpoint tool as far as checks and things that you can do that covers what most people's needs are. And again, it gets back to, when I think about, and I talk to a lot of different companies, when I think about enterprises and what they're trying to do, there's two things. I mean, there's really three things, I guess. There's the security itself. What's the risk? How to mitigate those risks and mitigate the risk of an exploit or ransomware attack, which everybody knows how important that is. There's also regulatory requirements that most people have to deal with now in various businesses, and how can you cost effectively deal with that? But the third is really, the third part of it is cost. How much does it cost? And that's product cost, but probably more important, it's resource cost. How much resource does it take to implement a proper cyber hygiene practice to where on a daily basis what your security posture looks like, how many vulnerabilities you have, how many new critical vulnerabilities are there. You have a tool that allows you to conveniently mitigate those risks by applying patches, and having that process be as efficient as possible. So that's key. And then the regulatory requirements are also key, not just from a security standpoint, but also because of fines and penalties and so forth associated with not being compliant to standards. So that's very important. So those are all taken care of with the agent. You see those deviations on a daily basis. And then the third, as I mentioned, is really just general IT management, being able to install applications, know what applications are there, what are your assets, how many applications aren't being used that should be deleted or out of date. All that kind of stuff is handled with the tool. All the stuff is available within the one platform, all these tools. And then you have, of course, you can deploy the agents, you can look at reports, and the reports you can tailor the reports, you can create custom reports and so forth. So we have all that kind of capability in the product. And looking at alerts, so you have alerts, so based upon vulnerabilities or compliance or threats or endpoint stuff, you can set up email-based alerts with different criteria. and logs, so you always know who did what when. And that's pretty much what the product is about. But at the high level, again, it's cyber hygiene, properly securing your endpoints, getting visibility into what's going on those endpoints, and doing it in a very manageable way. That's our view on cyber hygiene and why we built this particular product. As I mentioned, we do OEM a lot of technology and have for 12 years to other companies, other security vendors. And then a few years ago, we built this product to serve a very specific need, putting together several very critical concepts for scanning, patching, compliance, and IT management. And Lucas, I think that at this point, I'll maybe turn it back over to you.
I appreciate that, Greg. We'll be opening now to questions and answers. So if you can hold for a while, that would be great. Pessoal, bom dia de novo. Espero que vocês estejam aproveitando aí, gostando do conteúdo. Nós vamos abrir agora para perguntas e respostas. Se vocês tiverem alguma questão ou alguma pergunta que vocês gostariam de colocar aí para o Greg, do ponto de vista de funcionalidade, ou para nós aqui também do time da Next, fique à vontade. A gente vai abrir aqui por alguns minutos, dependendo da quantidade de perguntas que vocês eventualmente tenham. Basta clicar no ícone do chat, da conversação ali do lado direito, e enviar sua pergunta pelo chat. Enquanto vocês vão formulando aí as perguntas, eu gostaria de fazer um comentário aqui bem importante, tá? Se vocês, como vocês puderem notar aí, a ferramenta ela tem uma abrangência bem extensa, tá? Ela cobre desde a parte do levantamento das vulnerabilidades existentes no ambiente, tá? Então eu recomendo aí para vocês, aqueles que não tiveram ainda, não fizeram uma prova de conceito, uma POC, pode falar conosco, porque eu acho que esse é um processo bacana, você entender o que você tem de vulnerabilidade no ambiente, tá? Mas também entender o porquê é importante uma ferramenta que possa fazer esse tipo de verificação, tá? Todos nós sabemos aí que a LGPD entrou em vigor e um dos requisitos da LGPD é que nós tenhamos uma ferramenta ou um processo de identificar as vulnerabilidades, tá? Isso está no inciso 2º do artigo 3º da lei, tá? Então, e diga-se de passagem, essa é uma parte muito explorada, tá? Pela parte da lei. Então, em casos de incidentes onde a organização tenha que comprovar de que ela tem boas práticas de cibersegurança, esse é um dos itens, dos requisitos que é muito abordado dentro da lei em diversas partes do texto, tá? Então, fica a dica, tá? Além da parte de análise de vulnerabilidade, nós temos também a parte de gestão de atualizações, tá? A parte de gestão de atualização dentro da ferramenta é algo bem tranquilo. Como vocês viram ali, basicamente é selecionar as vulnerabilidades encontradas no ambiente ou as atualizações encontradas na varredura que foi feita nas estações ou nos servidores e enviar a aplicação daquela atualização, tá? Isso acaba facilitando muito esse processo do ponto de vista de deployment, tá? Então, é importante que nós tenhamos aí essa visibilidade também. Terceiro ponto aqui que eu achei bem bacana é a questão da parte de compliance, né, de conformidade, tá? Para configuração. Isso daqui é algo bastante requerido e para as empresas de cibersegurança que ofertam esse tipo de serviço, é um serviço com um valor elevado. Então, nós temos uma ferramenta que ela nos proporciona um baseline, um hardening de segurança para todos os nossos sistemas operacionais com base nas melhores práticas de mercado, Tá? Então eu vejo que faz muito sentido nós termos esse tipo de solução dentro de casa para os times de TI, os times de cibersegurança, endereçar as necessidades da organização. Tá? Bom, como não chegou nenhuma questão até o momento, tá? Entendo que esteja bem claro aí, tá? Qual o propósito da ferramenta. Agora nós vamos passar aqui a Thaís, ela vai fazer o sorteio, tá? Com base na lista que nós temos de convidados, todos os inscritos, todos que se inscreveram para participar, porém esse sorteio do Google Home ele vai ser para quem estiver presente, tá? Então nós vamos fazer o sorteio, a pessoa que estiver presente aí que foi sorteado, estiver presente no webinar, peço por favor que digite aí no chat, né, que está presente, tá? Nós vamos dar um minutinho para que ela se pronuncie. Para nós, caso contrário, caso ela não esteja no webinar, nós vamos sortear para uma outra pessoa que esteja. Então fiquem atentos aí, que nós faremos o sorteio em alguns instantes. Tá? Enquanto isso, fica aí aberto para vocês, caso tenham alguma pergunta, colocar aí.